And this book is older than my children, and no one knows this, so this is a surprise to even my mother. In 2007, this book is just a little piece of me. It's not a diary, but it's different things that I write in. And I don't know why, but in 2007, on May 24th, Dad pulled me aside and said, hey, I want you to tell my story, my last words. And I'm like, Dad, what are you talking about? He says, he said, when my time comes. I said, Dad, how will I know what to say? And he says, well, you'll know. And, it was almost 15 years ago. I was a lot younger. I didn't think much about it. And I said, well, Dad, you got to give me something. And Mom, he wrote 2 things down, which I've incorporated into his story. Gator jaws. And you were beautiful in blue. And I never knew for a long time what that meant, but I think it's your wedding dress. So this is, I started this a couple years ago, and I finished it at 1:30 this morning. And I've called it, Let Me Have the Last Word, by Thomas Whitney. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody who's here today, because I can assure you that if you're here, you know you were loved by him. My dad was a character, and no one knows that more than my mom. And let me start off by saying that he could be a handful, and again, no one knows that more than my mother, but Mom, you were his world. The book that I'm holding, as I said, is over 30 years old, and it's what my dad would call, it's this and that. Nobody's ever seen this book. I don't even know if Brian Smith or if Steve Hodgson or my girls have seen it, and you guys will never see it till probably I die, and it'll probably be in my casket with me. There's a lot of secrets in here, including my dad's. He said, as I mentioned, when my time comes, I want you to have the last word for me, and can you do that? And I said, Dad, how do I know what you want me to say? And again, he looked at me and he smiled and he said, you'll know. My father, Thomas Whitney, known by the nickname of Big Tom for most of his life because of his big stature, was born on April 3rd, 1938 in Westmoreland, Tennessee. Our father, although was a big man of strength in his young days, was a quiet man, as many have said today, and he was one of few words, and that was, unless he was telling a story, then you couldn't really get him to hush. Westmoreland, Tennessee, as his sisters could tell you, it was a little small town with a tiny train tunnel. The tiny train tunnel was many believed to be the tiniest railway tunnels in the world, and it was built in the early 1800s. It was only 42 feet long. And the only reason why I'm sharing this with you is because there wasn't much in Westmoreland, Tennessee, but that was their claim to fame. He was in the middle of Tennessee town with only 2,000 people, and it was 5 miles from the Kentucky border on the map. And I want to give you a little bit of history about my dad. When my father was born in 1938, if this tells you this generation and how much they've seen, 1938, the ballpoint pen was invented by Charles Biro. And following Dad's birth, not long after that, Nazi Germany and its allies conquered much of Europe. They confiscated Jewish property in many places. They started to require Jews to identify armed bands and establish ghettos and forced labor camps. The big movies were the adventures of Robin Hood, and the minimum wage was 25 cents an hour. The famous quote of "Who's on First" by Abbott and Costello was launched and is forever known. And these are just some tidbits that my dad would talk to me about from time to time. My dad mentioned many of the above, and he talked about the farms and the creeks, or as he would call it, the crick. He told us how he made molasses and sorghum. Some of you, probably under 20, don't even know what molasses or sorghum is, but Dad could tell you how it was made. He loved to tell his stories, and I think that's what I'm gonna miss the most, is hearing and not hearing his voice. My dad loved his family, and he loved his friends as family, and I picked that trait up from him, because my dad taught me when you have a true friend, they're like family. He loved his mom and dad, and he loved every one of his siblings. He loved his cousins, his uncles, he loved his in-laws, and I can guarantee you he had a story about each of you. My dad loved us, his children and his grandchildren. To all of his grandchildren, he loved you. He's proud of each and every one of you. He held each and every one of you when you came in this world. And the look on his face would always say it all. And he knew that each and every one of you would do great things in your life, is what your mama, myself, Charlotte, and Mike have all witnessed. And I'm standing here today to tell you that your grandfather, your papa, was proud of you. To my brother Mike, Dad loved you and was so proud of the man you are. He would say, "That's my son." And to Mike, there's a deeper meaning behind those words, and he knows that. You and he both have a bit of that wild streak. And of all people, he knew how to reason with you the most in your younger days, and you with him in the end. To my sister Charlotte, you're his firstborn daughter. And although he loved to tease you about your Whitney feet, he more so loved to tell everyone how intelligent you were and how you did well in school and college. He loved to brag on his smart daughter, his intelligent daughter, the first one to go to college, and that was you, sister. As for me, I was his baby. I never got the intelligent one. I'm a little disappointed in that. But I stand here as 53 years old, and no more than a week ago, he looked at the nurse and says, "That's my beautiful baby girl." So I didn't get the smart remark, but I'll take that being his baby girl. His love for family was huge, and his biggest love was to his wife, our mother. Emma June Whitney, the two met in the early 60s, and although it wasn't love at first sight, my mom told Dad to go away. She wanted nothing to do with him. She wasn't amused or interested in him. She said, "I'm not amused at all by your flirting. You need to leave." At some point, Mom, you must have given in, because the rest is history. And I probably wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for you giving in to Dad. So I'm grateful for that. Mom, my Dad loved you more than he loved himself. And although Dad was not always an easy man, over the many years, it was you that stood beside him and always made him whole again. My dad was born to you, Mom. And our Heavenly Father knew he'd never make it through life without you. He needed you, Mom. And he lived his last breath loving you. Mom, these are my dad's. I'm standing here today on behalf of your husband, my father, who said he wanted to have the last word because he never got it with you. When your time came that I was to tell you, Gator Jaws, that you were the reason for making it through the hard times, and that was Dad's direct quote in my book. As he said I would know what to say, I know he would want you to know that he would chip plaster Paris out of sinks 1,000 times over for you. And no matter how many times you backed your car through the garage doors, or how many projects or walls you would knock down, and he would have to finish them, I know he loved you through it all. Dad, I want to close by saying that although you were a quiet man and one of few words, and that words were not your strongest virtue, we always knew we were loved, and we always knew you were there for us in the best ways you knew how. Mom, Dad wanted you to know that when his time come, that I made sure it was more about you than him. And those are his words, not mine. So I hope I've honored his wishes to the best of my ability. And I close with this, and it's to Emma from Tom. Again, these are Dad's words. You are beautiful and blue, and I love you, Emma June.